As always, Adam Rank's got his starts and sits. If you want to read the full list, you can check him out at NFL.com/start-sit. But we'll start at the quarterback position because that's usually where we start. You are believing continually in the emancipation of Deshaun Watson from that Bill O'Brien offense, huh?
Yeah, he certainly had his best week of the season in the wake of Bill O'Brien's, I was just going to say Bob, in the wake of his firing. And so I expect that trend to continue this week. He's got a pretty good matchup, good enough against Tennessee. I think over his history, he's performed pretty well against them. If he doesn't do it passing, he certainly does it running against them. So I think this is a pretty safe start. He's had at least 2 touchdown passes in 3 consecutive games. And going back, he's averaged close to 23 fantasy points per game in his last 3 against Tennessee, whether it's running or passing. And another quarterback that I like is somebody I mentioned a moment ago is Ryan Fitzpatrick, revenge game against the Jets. And I know that him going out there after a great game in San Francisco and blowing up would be on brand for Ryan Fitzpatrick as his Hawaiian shirts and his beard. But I do love the fact that he's had at least 21 fantasy points in 4 consecutive games. The Jets have allowed 275 passing yards per game to quarterbacks this season. They're allowing quarterbacks to score over 30 fantasy points per game. So Ryan Fitzpatrick seems safe enough. You're never truly safe with Ryan Fitzpatrick, but I feel really secure this week.
He's your QB7, and he's actually 5th among quarterbacks in rushing yards. So, I don't think he's going to be the Dolphins rushing leader again this year, but, he's getting it done with his legs. Speaking of guys who get it done with their legs, who are your running back starts for the week?
Well, I'm going to go with David Montgomery in this matchup against Carolina. They've allowed the most fantasy points to running backs this season, or at least they did coming into week 6. I know the Titans game might have mixed things up before I did my research and everything, so I might be working off of old numbers, but Carolina's been very generous to opposing running backs. I think it's safe to say. And I also like that he's getting targeted a lot. He's had at least 6 targets in back-to-back games. And if you notice, it's not necessarily always dump offs. There are some designed plays for him. And as a matter of fact, the reception that helped set up the winning field goal was a designed play down the field for him. So I love to see him involved in the passing game, which is why the Bears don't need Le'Veon Bell. Also like Kareem Hunt this week against the Pittsburgh Steelers, that yes, when you look at the Steelers, this is a tough team against opposing running backs. But what we said last week with Miles Sanders is that they've always allowed one running back to get over 12 fantasy points per game. And obviously Miles Sanders did that. This week, it's going to be Kareem Hunt. I know it will sometimes be difficult because that Steelers defense is good, but by the end of the day, Kareem Hunt will have double-digit points for you. So if you have any concerns, don't. He's a secure start.
Over at the wide receiver position, I know we don't talk a lot about the Jets, but we talked about them a lot earlier in the show. But I guess if there's one Jet that there's left to start, you are starting him at wide receiver, huh?
Yeah, I feel like we've been so harsh on the Jets that we should at least accentuate one positive, which has been Jamison Crowder, who is the wide receiver 2 on the season. Like, he has been incredible. He's had at least 10 targets, 7 receptions, and 100 yards in all 3 games that he's played this season. The Dolphins have allowed the 8th most receiving yards per game to wide receivers. And again, he's their most targeted guy. And really what we're looking at is how great is he going to be once he gets post Adam Gase, because that could actually be pretty fantastic. And you know what? I like Michael Gallup this week. I think he's a secure start. And allow me to say both of these Cowboys receivers, him and CeeDee Lamb, will be very good options for you. The Arizona Cardinals have allowed 4 receiving touchdowns to the slot this season. That probably impacts CeeDee Lamb more in this case, because I think he's run the 2nd most routes from the slot in the entire NFL. But Michael Gallup also was the guy that Andy Dalton was going to when the game was on the line. And we saw Amari Cooper's snaps decrease dramatically last week. Again, we don't want to make too much of it until it becomes a full-blown trend. But I really do like Michael Gallup and CeeDee Lamb this week.
It's a reminder, though, that this is a long season. I feel like 2 or 3 weeks ago, we were starting to freak out and thinking that it was all over for Michael Gallup. Now, all of a sudden, he's back in our good graces, and he's a secure start this week. Tight end, how much does it pain you to have to pump up a Packer here at the tight end spot?
It is painful. And Robert Tonyan Obviously, 3 touchdowns in an island game in a primetime contest, and everybody will feel like it's chasing the points to go out there and pick him up. But he's the tight end 4 right now. And I know a lot of that is buoyed by the fact that he did have one blow up game, but he's had 5 receiving touchdowns since week 2. That's tied for the most in the NFL with Mike Evans. And he has had a touchdown in 3 consecutive games. There is a chance that Devontae Adams returns, and we never hear from Robert Tonyan again. But until I see that, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have allowed 1 receiving touchdown to a tight end in back-to-back games, I'm going to roll with them once again. I'm not like trading Travis Kelce because I'm like, I got a tight end. But I think that, if you need a secure start at tight end, I think he's going to be one of them. And I also really like Noah Fant. He's the tight end 7 this season, despite the deficiencies at the quarterback position for the Denver Broncos. They've really had a tough time with it. But Noah Fant has continued to persevere with it. He scored at least 8 fantasy points in every game this season. And I know that doesn't seem like a lot, but if you've been streaming Mo Alley Cox or Logan Thomas, then 8 points is a pretty significant total for you. Like, I will take that for sure. And the New England Patriots have allowed 10 fantasy points to tight ends in back-to-back games. So secure. I'm in. Let's do it.
So earlier in the show, I talked about Joe Flacco getting the start for the Jets and saying, maybe you want to start the Dolphins. I don't know. I guess you want to start the Dolphins, huh? I don't know.
I would start the Dolphins for the turnover potential. Last week, we saw the Dolphins really get after the quarterback as well. I know the 49ers are struggling on the offensive line, but that's been kind of a problem for the Jets too. So I think I'm pretty comfortable streaming the Dolphins this week. They should be available to you on the waiver wire. Now, the schedule did get switched up because the Dolphins were scheduled to play the Broncos. So that means that people who are always thinking ahead and trying to get ahead of the curve and be like, who are the Jets playing next week? They probably missed out on this one. So see if the Dolphins are available to you. And we also like the football team, the Washington football team. I know, like last week, it was crazy when I advocated that people go out and pick up the Dallas Cowboys. They're like, dude, the Cowboys are awful. And then they ended up scoring 9 points. I think the Washington FT can do that as well. We've seen Danny Dimes make a lot of mistakes. He still hasn't cleaned up the turnovers. He didn't have an interception last week, but he still lost a fumble. So I think that you're looking at least 1 turnover for him. I think that you could look at a situation where the Redskins, so that going old school, the FT can end up getting 4 sacks or something like that. So again, if you're in a situation where you have to stream a defense, the Washington FT might not be a bad option for you, just like the Cowboys were last week.
Yeah, I mean, as much as I like Danny Dimes, I thought Daniel Jones is set for a breakout season. The turnovers are still a major problem for him, so might as well play to that and try to take advantage of it where you can. That was Secure Starts, presented by Visa. So we did the starts. Now we got to turn around and do the sits at quarterback. Matty Ice is living up to his nickname in a bad way lately.
Yeah, there really hasn't been a lot of consistency with him. And they also fired their head coach, and people will look at me like, well, Deshaun Watson, they fired his head coach. He went out and had his best game of the year, but Dirk Cutter still remains as the offensive coordinator. And I'm not so sure that isn't the problem. I know that the Falcons have struggled at the coordinator spot ever since Kyle Shanahan left for San Francisco. They brought in Sark for a while. They brought in Dirk Cutter. They're like, how many former Pac-12 guys can we bring in here to really see if we can turn this thing around? And neither one of them got it going. So I know that's a good matchup. The Vikings have allowed the 6th most passing yards per game to quarterbacks this season. They've allowed a quarterback to get more than 20 fantasy points in 3 games. So Matt Ryan's not the worst streaming option, but until I see some more consistency, I'm just not going to go with it. And Teddy Bridgewater, 2 consecutive weeks playing really well. We streamed him last week. He was part of Now Streaming, and that crushed. But now he's got the Chicago Bears, who have allowed 12 fantasy points per game to quarterbacks this season. That's the 2nd fewest in the NFL. They've allowed 4 touchdown passes to quarterbacks over the entire NFL, the fewest in the league. And they rattled Tom Brady so much, he was out there seeing 5th downs that don't exist. So Teddy Bridgewater, unfortunately, we're not starting you. I do like Mike Davis in that game because the one place that you can attack the Bears is running the football. Eddie Goldman, of course, opted out before the season started. They really haven't been able to figure that out. Although the defense is still playing pretty well, that we're splitting hairs. They're 4-1. Like, what do you want from me? But I would go with Mike Davis. I wouldn't go with Teddy Bridgewater.
Only Charles Johnson and the Colorado Buffaloes get fifth downs. That's like early 90s humor that maybe like 7
That's
people
right.
are going
Oh, my
God. Like, there's only a handful of people that are going to get that joke.
They won a national championship with that, right?
Yes, they did. Yes, they absolutely did.
Oh, my gosh.
So that joke was worth it to me, even if nobody else really finds it funny. That's fine. Running backs. I'm done with the Ravens. I'm out. And I feel like you telling people to sit Mark Ingram is just a public service announcement.
Yeah, you know what? It really is, because you look at the Ravens and nobody runs the ball better than them. They're very prolific. It's like if you were, but not being able to trust a running back is like if you were a donut shop, but people only knew you for your coffee. Like, that would be weird. Like, that would never happen, right? Like, that is something that would never exist. So I'm not starting him. He's getting out-snapped by Gus Edwards. None of these guys have rushed for over 57 yards, I believe it is, in a game, and nobody's getting more than 11 carries. It's an awful situation. It is the very definition of a running back by committee. And speaking of that game, the Bengals RB1, everybody took such huge victory laps when he had his 40-point performance that they're like, look, he's back, baby. We told you. And then last week wasn't very good. This week is not going to be very good. He's your friend that flakes on you for golf on Friday every week. And then one week he shows up and you're like, oh my God, this is great. Like, hey, and then you make plans like, we're going to do this every week. And you're like, right on. Thursday night, he texts you, see you tomorrow. And then the next morning you're at the tee box. You never see him again. That's that guy. And so I'm not starting him. And you know what? I was never a fan of his anyway, so I really don't miss him. So there's that.
I advocated that after that huge game, that was the time to try to trade him, because he was going to fade back. It felt inevitable that he was going to go back to what he was doing early in the year. Wide receiver spot. DJ Moore has been sort of frustrating at this point. Are we giving up on him fully, or is it just kind of a stay away this week?
It's going to be inconsistent. And I know a lot of people, we talk about advocating trading for players after they have a breakout game. And with the Bengals RB1, that happens because everybody just wants to believe that he'll be good, and he never is. But with DJ Moore, nobody's falling for that. Like, you can't deal DJ Moore. Even the rubes in your fantasy league know better than to try to do it. And what we really just have to understand is that he's going to be a volatile player this year. There's going to be opportunities to start him. Last week against the Falcons, it made a lot of sense. This week against the Bears, it does not make a lot of sense for the same reasons that we're not starting Teddy Bridgewater, that the strength of this Bears defense is in the pass, or defending against the pass. Jalen Johnson, the second-round pick out of Utah, is fantastic. Him and Kyle Fuller might end up being the best cornerback tandem in the league. So we're going to keep DJ Moore on the bench, and we're also going to keep AJ Green on the bench. And the only reason, and I hope they're not disappointing me, I'm trying not to look at the B-roll right now. Are you showing the play, the interception where he's not trying? Please show me that they're running that highlight, because that was amazing. That's pretty much the situation with AJ Green now, where he's not even trying on the interceptions. Didn't jump for the pass from Joe Burrow. And I don't even know how the Bengals, like, it wouldn't surprise me if he was an inactive this week. I don't know how you can go in to that receiver room, look at that tape and be like, bro, you're not playing anymore. Like, notice, I like AJ Green. I think AJ Green, cool guy. He's always been cool to me. We played Call of Duty one time and it was a lot of fun. And the thing is, but if you're a coach, you're like, yeah, we can't have you out on the field. And that's disappointing. And maybe he and Le'Veon Bell can go to New England and do whatever, but he can't play for your fantasy team or the Cincinnati Bengals.
I do think that his time in Cincinnati is pretty much done. That play that you mentioned probably sealed it. So he had a great long run, but I think it's over for AJ in Cincinnati. Tight ends, who are we staying away from this week?
Dalton Schultz was a little bit of a disappointment last week. And again, with so many mouths to feed with the Dallas Cowboys, it's going to be hard to really trust him. Plus, we saw, like, Andy Dalton was very diplomatic. Three targets for Gallup. The important ones went to Gallup. 3 to Amari Cooper, 3 to CeeDee Lamb. It's to the point now, I know we love Blake Jarwin coming into the year. We thought perhaps Dalton Schultz could pick that up. And you would think that, like, Dalton Schultz and Andy Dalton would get along because they have a cool little icebreaker. Like, hey, Dalton, I don't know. Maybe it's the kind of thing that upset Andy Dalton. I don't really know the man. So maybe he's upset that there's another Dalton there trying to steal his thunder, and he never is going to throw to him. I don't know. I can't trust him. Also can't trust Darren Fells. You know why? He went to Fullerton High School. So it only makes sense that he went to Cal State Fullerton, right? Oh no, you'd be mistaken, because he went to UCI. For whatever reason, I'll never know. And if he would have been a part of that 2008 Cal State Fullerton team, he would have been the big-bodied presence. We would have beat Wisconsin. I don't know who Wisconsin played in the second round. We would have gone all the way to the Sweet 16. We had Bobby Brown, Frank Robinson, Scott Cutley. That was one of the best Cal State Fullerton teams I had seen since I was a freshman, and we had Bruce Bowen and Cedric Ceballos on a team. That was my college team when I was a freshman. But anyways, I digress. I don't know. I know I didn't give any reasons to not start. Darren Fells, he's not consistent enough. He's a touchdown dependent guy. He's just not consistent enough. Sorry about that.
I'm just thinking that he wanted to get away from home, so he made the 19-mile trek from Fullerton to Irvine.
He went to Irvine. If he would have went to Fordham, that makes sense. He wanted to get out of town. I get it. But no, Irvine. Was Concordia? Were they not taking you?
I mean, sometimes that drive can take 45 minutes. It can be kind of killer when there's traffic.
It could take 2 hours. It's taken me 2 hours to get to Irvine from Fullerton. By the way, he could have gone to Chapman and played football, because he didn't play. They don't have a football team at UCI. I know a lot of people might not know that. He's the one who doesn't get enough love for hey, did you know this guy played college basketball? Because that's all he could do. They didn't even have a football team. He didn't even play water polo, which Irvine's really good.
Irvine's actually really good at water polo, yeah.
Really good.
No one cares about this conversation but us, but that's fine. Defenses.
There's going to be 4 people. No, we'll get more tweets about that. Rank knows his Big West sports, but I digress.
Hey, man, aren't they? I think they're in the Mountain Pacific Sports Federation for water polo, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right.
Defenses, where are we staying away from this week?
Well, I'm going to stay away from my friends down in Duval County, the Jacksonville Jaguars. They're just not creating enough. They've been very inconsistent. They're not getting double-digit points. I need them to create more turnovers. I need them to create more sacks, and we're just not seeing enough of that. And another team that we're not going to be starting this week is the Bills, just because what we saw. I mean, partly because of what we saw against the Tennessee Titans, but they're also giving up a ton of points. They can't hold, they almost blew that huge lead against the Rams. And then we saw what happened to them with the Titans. So I think there's going to be any time now that they're on the field, we're actually targeting their players. So the Bills are a defense that you thought coming into the year, maybe this will be a good sneaky little team, but I don't think that we can use them.
Yeah, I think it takes some people a while. I think that muscle memory is slow to change, but I do think the Bills are a defense that maybe aren't as fearsome as we saw in years past. So maybe we can start to go after them a little bit.